Hello there. Today I'm taking a look at a wine from the Russian River Valley. This is Frei Brothers Sonoma Reserve Chardonnay from 2020. And this is an estate that has a history that dates back to the 1890s when Andrew Frei, an immigrant coming from Switzerland, bought 139 acres in Dry Creek Valley. Subsequently, Andrew's sons, Walter and Louis, took over the estate from him and renamed it Frei Brothers. Now, looking at the dates, they seem to vary a little, but I would think the suggestion is that the brothers took over the estate in 1903 and renamed it Frei Brothers in 1909. Having done this, they carried on running the vineyard for over 70 years, and it wasn't until 1978 that, having retired, they sold to the large producing company Ernest and Julio Gallo, who have owned the winery ever since. The claim on their website is that the long history that the winery has given it some very good relations with the growers that it works with, the sort of deep-seated relationships. Certainly, their current winemaker, Scott Johnson, started working here in 2003, so there's a good 20 years of stability under the same guidance that has established quite a good reputation for these wines as being good value for money varietal wines representing the region that they come from. The other approach that's been maintained is that of sustainable viticulture, and the winery has now reached 30 years of being a member of the California Sustainable Wine Growers Alliance. The Russian River Valley is a very high quality region for producing Chardonnays and Pinot Noirs. It's relatively cool, it's affected by cool breezes coming from the cold ocean, and also morning fogs that come up from the sea through what is called the Petaluma Gap, and that's the same gap that cools some of the Napa Valley as well. Because this region is cool, it's quite well suited to the production of high quality Chardonnays and Pinot Noirs, and that's seen in some of the wineries that are here, people like Williams, Celium, Landmark and Sonoma County. I don't have a huge amount of detail about the way that this wine is made. Their website has tasting notes and quite a lot of marketing jargon on it, but very little detail as to wine production. One or two things I've seen, for instance, I know that the 2018 vintage of this was actually only 98% Chardonnay, which would suggest that they're not adverse to putting a little bit of some other varieties in here, which is allowed in American law, just to perhaps soften the wine. It's not unusual that sometimes a tiny amount of Gewürztraminer or Sauvignon or something like that are blended into a Chardonnay of a relatively commercial quality, just to give it a little bit more sort of aromatics or softness, and that's perfectly legitimate under American winemaking law. But it would really be nice to have some sort of idea as to the oak usage, the types of oak, the size of oak, the time that the wine's spent with oak, or has it had technical oak? Maybe that's why they don't want to discuss this. Other notes I've seen suggest that there's a range of oak actually used here, so they do employ not only French and American oak but also some Hungarian oak, but I don't know specifically what goes on with this particular Chardonnay. So anyway, Frei Brothers Sonoma Reserve, let's see what it tastes like, shall we? So firstly, to look at the colour, we've got a pale to medium yellow colour there, nice and bright. The wine is 14% alcohol. It's I assume a dry wine. It's not particularly throwing heavy tears there in the glass. So let's see what the aromas are like. Initially the aromas have I suppose there's a lemony note, but actually the aroma, the fruit aroma that's the fore is a sort of a green apple note, and there's plenty of that. Behind that there's a slight toastiness and also quite a bit of creamy lees notes. I think that's very attractive, light, fresh Chardonnay style on the nose. Let's see what it tastes like. There's a good crispness. There's a sort of I suppose there's a tart green apple note, which might suggest that at least some of the malic acid here has been retained. The fruit, although it sort of starts with an appley crispness, actually moves on to a more tropical peach with perhaps pear notes on the mid palate, and then quite quickly the creamy notes of lees aging are taking over there. There's not a lot of evidence of sort of toasty or vanilla oak on the palate. There's much more of that sort of rich, buttery, perhaps a tiny touch of butterscotch, so maybe there is a little bit of malolactic conversion was allowed to go through there. And the flavours are lasting reasonably well. There's a fresh, lemony finish, perhaps some of the little bit of the appliness is coming back. I suppose the 14% alcohol and the leesiness is giving a reasonable weight and roundness to the back palate. So I think that's it's not an exceptional Chardonnay. I mean, I think from the Russian River Valley, this quality wine producing area, there are examples such as Landmark, Sonoma County, etc., that are going to be much better than this. But this is a well-made wine exhibiting quite a lot of character, probably with a little bit of aging potential. I think you could probably keep this for a couple of years and it would develop a little bit more toastiness in the bottle. But at the same time, it's ready to drink now. It's got quite good freshness. I've seen people suggest that this has a touch of sweetness in it. It's certainly not this vintage to my mind. I mean, yes, there is a ripeness and a roundness to it, but I don't think there's actually a sugar sweetness that is making this anything other than a dry wine. I'm not suggesting it's bone dry, but you know, that is a pretty dry, medium-bodied wine with some nice complexity and reasonable length. So I would suggest that if you're looking for a value for money Chardonnay, that's actually quite a good example of that. So thank you very much for watching. I hope you find this interesting. If you do, please like the video, please share it with your friends. Do think about signing up and following us on YouTube. Do leave your comments below if you disagree or if you agree. But most importantly, do please see if you can make some time to join us for another tasting very soon, won't you? Bye now.